Having your API constantly make extra calls to get user permissions information can be slow and add latency. Let me show you how to add data from Auth0 FGA into the access token. Hello everyone, my name is Carla and I'm a senior developer advocate here at Auth0. Today we're going to dive into a powerful Auth0 feature, which is enriching access token, but we're going to do that with data from Auth0 FGA. This will allow your backend to make authorization decisions more efficiently and faster. In order to do this, we're going to be using Auth0 Actions. An action is a code snippet that will execute at a given point in the Auth0 pipeline. In our case, we're going to create an action that's going to trigger right after the user logs in. So what's this action going to do? First, it's going to connect to our Auth0 FGA instance. Then we're going to use the OpenFGA SDK to list all the organizations a user belongs to. And then we're going to add that list of organizations as a custom claim into the Auth0 Access Token. So let's get to it. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is we're going to take a look at Auth0 FGA and what the data looks like over there. So I'm here in my store that I call Enrich token because I'm using it for testing purposes. And I've already defined a model here. As I was mentioning, we're going to have a user, and a user can be an admin, a member, a doc creator, or a doc admin from organizations. And we also have documents. And documents also belong to an organization. Actually, let me zoom in a little bit more so you can see it better. I've also created some tuples. Basically, I've created a user that is an admin from the organization DevRel and a user that is a member of the organization OpenFGA. Now, the next thing we need to do is we need to make sure that we tell Auth0 to which instance of Auth0 FGA it's going to connect to. So for that, we need to create an authorized client on the Auth0 FGA side. So we're going to go to settings and we're going to scroll down to authorized clients. And so what this client is going to do is give us a client ID and a client secret pair for our application. So we're going to create a client and I'm going to give it permission to do almost everything. Just make sure you only give it permission to the things that you need. I'm going to call it Enrich token client and I'm going to create it. The moment we create it, we're going to get some credentials on the screen and you're going to get a warning here to make sure to copy this information somewhere. I'm going to leave it here for now because we're going to use it when we start doing the implementation on the action. You know what? Actually, if I click continue, I'm going to get the node code that I'm going to need. So we're actually going to start with that because I think it's better. So as you can see here, we're going to be using the Node SDKs. Why the Node SDKs? Well, basically because an Auth0 action is built in Node. So for us to do that, we're going to need to create a new OpenFGA client with the information of this particular client that we have here. That's why we're going to be using this client ID and this client secret. And the rest of the information like the API audience and the API token issuer is always available in your settings here in Auth0 FGA. So I'm going to actually copy this code because I know I'm going to use it in a bit. So we're going to go now to create the action. We're going to go to Auth0 and I'm going to go to Actions, Library, and create a new custom action. I'm going to name it Enrich token with organizations. That action is going to execute right after login. So this is the trigger that we're going to use. And we're going to leave the runtime version of Node to be the recommended one. So in here, we're going to start implementing our action. I'm going to go ahead and paste the code snippet that I got from Auth0 FGA, mainly because there's a few things I want to do here. So the first thing is I need to install the OpenFGA SDK. The second thing is I have a bunch of secrets here that I shouldn't just put out there. Luckily, Actions have a feature called secrets where I can add those. And I think that's it for now. So I think we're going to start by installing the OpenFGA client. So we're going to go here to Dependencies and we're going to add a new dependency. The name is @OpenFGA SDK and we want the latest version. So we're going to add that. And the next thing we're going to do is we're going to start adding secrets. So to do that, I'm going to start with the API URL. So this is the value, and we're going to call it FGA API URL. We're going to create one for the store ID. So FGA store ID. We're going to use this. One for the model ID. So FGA model ID with this value. One for the token issuer. FGA token API token issuer. So once we have our secrets there, we need to import stuff from OpenFGA, and that we can do right before the exports here. So here we're going to be using the OpenFGA SDK. As you can see, it's no longer red. And here we're creating our FGA client. So I obviously copied that from the code snippet from Auth0 FGA, but there's a verification I want to do. So the thing is, when you add custom claims to an access token, you want to put those under a namespace. So it's easier for you to identify what is that claim referring to. So for example, in this case, for a namespace, we can use a secret as well and call it namespace. And usually a namespace is something like, I'm going to put something like this in the secret, but I'm going to put it here so you can see what I'm actually typing. FGA Enrich token. This is what I'm going to call my namespace. All right, so I'm going to put that as the value of this secret. We're going to create that. And something also important about that is that you need to make sure that it actually ends with a slash. So we're going to have our namespace slash our custom claim. And we're going to add a simple verification that for that to happen, we're going to be reading from the secrets. And if that doesn't end with a /, we're just going to add it to our namespace variable. So the other thing we're going to do is once we have our client created, we're going to use it. And if you remember, we were trying to get the list of organization a user is related to into the access token. For that, we can use the list objects endpoint. This endpoint allows you to get information about all the objects that are related to a user via one particular relation. So in our case, we can type something like so. So we're going to do FGA client.listObjects, and then we're going to pass the user ID that is trying to log in. We're going to get, for example, the relation member, and the type of the object we're trying to get. In this case, is going to be an organization. If you remember from FGA, we have one tuple where our user, our test user, is actually a member. And I'm going to make sure to change this ID to a real ID so our code actually works. So now that we have the organizations that a user is a member of, we need to add that into the access token. And to do that, we're going to use the API object that comes in the action. So we're going to write API access token. We're going to set a custom claim, and that's going to be our namespace concatenated with the word organization. So this is going to look something like HTTP, I don't remember if I use an S, but let's hope I did. FGA enriched token, I think I put it, and if not, you know what I mean. It's the namespace. And then / organizations. And then as the value of this, we're gonna get a list of DevRel, and I think the other one we had was OpenFGA, but in this case, they were an admin, so in this case, we're only going to get DevRel. Something we need to make sure is some basic error management. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to put all of this into a try catch. And I would definitely start from where we create the client. So we're going to put a try here, and we're going to put all of this inside that try and a catch. And we're going to catch the error here. So I'm going to catch the error. And I'm going to say that if there's an error here, like I couldn't get the list of organizations or I couldn't connect to Auth0 FGA for any reason, I'm just not going to allow this user to log in because I don't have all the information. So I can do API access.deny. And then we can send a message, something like could not list organizations, something like that. So we are done with the action. We can do a quick test. You can test it here under this tab. And for example, here, something that we didn't do, I created all of those secrets, but I didn't actually replace the values here. So as you can see, it's done using this lovely variable here. So for the API URL, we're going to do secrets.fga API URL. I got a typo here because it's only one event, not multiple events. So if we try to test this action now, I'm going to click here in run and it should work. So apparently it did set the custom claim for the access token. And as you can see, the namespace that I was commenting on was kind of correct. No errors, so that's good. So I'm going to deploy this action. And then I'm going to add it to the trigger we need. So we said it's the post login action. And so I'm just going to add it here and I'm going to click apply. There we go. Now, in order for you to test this out, you probably have an application you're working on where you can test your login implementation. In my case, all I need is to test an access token. So I'm just going to use this OpenID Connect Playground. I already added the information I need here. This is a website where you can test out your implementation. So I have my tenant, my client ID, and my client secret, and my audience and whatnot. And I just want to see the access token that I'm going to get. So I'm going to start here. And then we got a code which we now need to exchange for that token and text. All right, so we got an access token. Let's test it out. It's very long. So I'm going to copy it and I'm going to use jwt.io to test this out. So as you can see in this token, we have the typical headers, but we want to focus on the payload. And as you can see, we have our namespace, which as you can see is this FGA enriched token. And then we have an empty list. So why do we have an empty list? Because I'm using a user that has no data in Auth0 FGA. So let me add my user ID into Auth0 FGA so you can actually see some real data. I'm going to go to here. Here I have my variables and I'm going to edit one of these tuples. So we were listing the ones that we're members of. So I'm just going to edit this one. I'm going to edit this. And maybe we can test this again. Let's test it from the beginning. I'm going to exchange this. And I got my access token. So let me copy that. Whoops, a bit long. There we go. And I'm going to decode this into jwt.io. So yep, after making the change in Auth0 FGA, you can see that we now have the organizations that this particular user is a member of. So there you have it. This is how you can enrich your Auth0 access token with data coming from Auth0 FGA. So you can have all the information related to user permissions directly available to you. And so you can have a faster and more reliable backend. Let me know if you have any questions in the comments. And again, thank you for watching.